My name is Tamika Reynolds and I'm 36 years old. On what I truly believe was the darkest day of my entire life, I sat in that freezing cold courtroom watching my husband Darnell fight to take everything from me, our home, our retirement fund, and full custody of our son. The judge was seconds away from ruling in his favor when out of nowhere a small voice echoed from the back of the room. It was my 11-year-old son, Jalen. "Your Honor," he said, his voice shaking but steady enough for every single person in that courtroom to hear. "Can I please show you something that my mom doesn't know about?" The judge paused. My heart completely stopped. What could Jalen possibly have? What had my baby boy been hiding from me this whole time? He walked forward, reached into his backpack, and pulled out a small tablet. The second that recording started playing on those courtroom screens, every single person in that room went dead silent. What showed up on that screen didn't just surprise the judge. It shattered my husband's entire case and revealed a scheme so heartless, so deliberate, so wicked that to this day I still have trouble believing it actually happened to me. But I'm jumping too far ahead. Let me take you back to the very beginning because you need to understand how a man I gave my whole life to, a man I trusted with every piece of my heart, became the person who tried to destroy me completely. Before the story begins, this is Nunny Stories. Please drop a comment telling us which state or city you're watching from. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so we can keep bringing you these real, powerful, true stories. My life in Houston used to feel like a dream come true. I had a gorgeous house in a peaceful suburb, a son who was the center of my entire universe, and a husband who I genuinely believed loved me with all his heart. Looking back on it now, I realize everything I thought was real was nothing but a carefully built illusion. Every single morning I woke up at 4:45 in the morning, y'all. While Darnell was still snoring away in our king-sized bed, I was already downstairs in that kitchen getting his breakfast ready. Scrambled eggs with cheese, chicken sausage links, wheat toast with butter, a glass of fresh apple juice, and his coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of cream exactly how he wanted it. I made sure his dress shirts were ironed and laid out on the back of the chair. I made sure his laptop bag was packed and sitting by the front door. I made sure every little thing was in its place because that's what I believed a good wife was supposed to do. By 6:15, I was heading upstairs to wake up Jalen, my sweet 11-year-old boy. I'd help him pick out a clean outfit, make sure he brushed his teeth properly, check that his homework was zipped up in his folder, and then I'd make him his favorite breakfast, blueberry waffles with whipped cream and a banana sliced on the side. We'd sit across from each other at the kitchen island and he'd tell me about his basketball practice, about the new video game his friend showed him, about the science project he was excited to start. Those morning moments with Jalen were sacred to me. They were honest, they were pure. They were the only part of my day where I felt like I truly mattered anymore. Darnell would come downstairs around 7:15, already dressed in one of those tailored suits he spent a fortune on. He'd sit at the counter, pull out his phone, take a sip of his coffee, and barely acknowledge that I existed. Maybe a grunt. Maybe a "this coffee's too sweet," even when I made it the exact same way I'd been making it for 12 years. Maybe absolutely nothing at all. I'd watch him ruffle Jalen's hair, tell him to have a good day at school, flash that big charming smile he saved for everyone except me. Then he'd walk right past me on his way to the door like I was a piece of furniture. No kiss on the cheek. No "thank you for breakfast, baby." No "have a good day, Tamika." Nothing. He'd just grab his bag and walk out, and I'd be standing there in that big, beautiful kitchen all by myself, feeling like a ghost in my own home, but I made excuses for him. I told myself it was just the pressure from work. Darnell was a senior financial analyst at a major investment firm downtown. He dealt with millions of dollars every day. He carried a lot of stress on his shoulders. That's what I kept repeating to myself. That's the lie I kept whispering in my own ear every single morning when he walked past me without a word. I gave up my career 11 years ago when Jalen was born. I had a solid job in human resources, y'all. I was making good money, had my own health insurance, had my own 401k, had my own sense of self. But Darnell talked me out of it. He said, "Tamika, our son needs his mother at home. I bring in more than enough for all 3 of us. You don't need to be working, just focus on our home and our boy." And like a fool, I listened to him. I gave up everything. My career, my paycheck, my financial independence. I handed it all over because I trusted my husband. For 11 years, I poured every single ounce of energy I had into being the perfect wife and the perfect mother. I kept that house spotless from top to bottom. I cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner from scratch every single day. I did all the laundry, all the mopping, all the dusting, all the grocery runs. I helped Jalen with his homework every evening. I coached his little league team 2 seasons in a row. I volunteered at his school's front office twice a week. I was there for every single game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. I never missed a moment of my son's life, and Darnell was barely around at all. Over the last year and a half, things between us got so much worse. Darnell started staying out later and later. "Got a client dinner," he'd say. "Board meeting ran long," he'd say. "Don't bother waiting up for me," he'd say. Some nights he wouldn't walk through that front door until 11:00 or even midnight. And when he did finally come home, he'd go straight to the spare bedroom down the hall without saying a single word to me. Just the sound of the door clicking shut. That was it. That was all I got from my husband. We used to have movie nights every Friday. That was our family tradition. Jalen would pick the movie, I'd make popcorn and nachos, and Darnell would set everything up in the living room with the big projector screen. It was our thing, but even those became painful. Darnell would sit in the recliner with his phone glued to his hand, texting somebody, scrolling through something, barely watching the screen. When Jalen would try to point out a funny scene, Darnell would give him a half smile and a lazy nod without even looking up. When I tried to talk to him during the movie, he'd shush me or give me one-word answers like I was bothering him. I felt like I was fading away. Like every day another piece of me was disappearing and nobody even noticed. But I held on, y'all. I held on tight. I kept telling myself that if I just tried harder, if I cooked better meals, if I kept the house even cleaner, if I lost a few pounds, if I just loved him more, things would go back to how they used to be. I was so blind, so painfully, embarrassingly blind. There were signs everywhere, y'all, red flags waving right in my face, and I ignored every last one of them. Darnell started wearing this new aftershave. Something sharp and expensive that I'd never smelled on him before. When I asked where he got it, he said one of his coworkers recommended it. I believed him. There were charges on our bank statement for restaurants I'd never heard of, for flower deliveries I'd never received, for hotel rooms I'd never stepped foot in. When I brought them up, he said they were client entertainment expenses or company retreats that he'd get reimbursed for. I believed him. His phone became a fortress. Always face down on the counter. He changed his password 3 times in 2 months. He started stepping out onto the back porch to take calls, lowering his voice to a whisper whenever I walked into the room. And every single time I asked him about it, he'd snap at me. "Why are you always in my business, Tamika? You're so paranoid, you're so insecure. I can't even have a private conversation without you hovering over me." And like a fool, y'all, like a complete and total fool, I believed him. My son saw everything. My sweet Jalen was watching every single thing that happened in that house, and he was way smarter than either of us ever gave him credit for. The day my entire world came crashing down started like any other Thursday evening. I had just picked Jalen up from basketball practice, and we were sitting at the kitchen table. He was finishing up his reading assignment, and I was sorting through the mail when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a courier standing on my front porch holding a thick white envelope. "Tamika Reynolds?" he asked. "Yes, that's me," I said, signing the little electronic pad. My stomach was already turning, y'all. I don't know why, but something deep in my gut was screaming that whatever was inside that envelope was going to change my life. The envelope had the name of a law firm printed in the corner. Blackwell and Harper, attorneys at law. I told Jalen to keep reading his book, and I walked into the dining room. I sat down at the table, took a deep breath, and tore that envelope open. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I read those words 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me, but there it was, printed in bold black ink on crisp white paper. Darnell was filing for divorce, but it wasn't just a divorce, y'all. It was a full-scale attack. The document accused me of being a negligent spouse. It said I had wholly failed in the maintenance of the marital household and the emotional support of the family unit. It called me mentally fragile. It called me an incompetent parent. It said I lacked the capability and temperament to provide a stable environment for our child. And then came the demands. And y'all, these demands made my head spin so fast I thought I was going to faint. Darnell was demanding full custody of Jalen, not joint custody, not shared weekends. Full sole, complete custody. He wanted to take my baby boy away from me entirely. He was demanding the house that I had poured my heart and soul into for over a decade, the house where I had raised our son, the house where I had scrubbed every floor, painted every wall, planted every flower in the garden. He was demanding all the marital assets, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio, the vehicles, everything. His argument. I hadn't contributed financially to the marriage, so I was entitled to nothing. 11 years of being a stay-at-home mother. 11 years of sacrificing my career, my income, my independence. 11 years of dedicating every waking moment to our family. And according to Darnell, I deserved absolutely nothing. I sat at that dining room table with those papers spread out in front of me, and I couldn't breathe. My chest was so tight it felt like someone was sitting on it. My hands were trembling so bad the papers were shaking. Tears started falling onto the pages, smearing the ink, and I couldn't stop them no matter how hard I tried. How could he do this to me? How could the man I had built a life with, the man I had given everything to, how could he try to rip me apart like this? I heard the garage door open. Darnell came home early that evening. The first time in months he'd been home before 9:00 p.m. and suddenly it all made sense. He wanted to be there when I opened that envelope. He wanted to see my face when my world fell apart. He wanted to watch me break. He walked into the dining room and saw me sitting there surrounded by those divorce papers, tears streaming down my face, my whole body shaking. And you know what he did, y'all? He didn't look shocked. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look the least bit sorry. He looked pleased, like he was watching something go exactly according to plan. "Darnell," I managed to choke out through my sobs. "What is this? What are you doing?" Darnell loosened his tie slowly, deliberately. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down like we were about to discuss what to have for dinner. He folded his hands on the table and looked at me with these cold, empty eyes that I didn't even recognize anymore. "It means exactly what it says, Tamika," he said, his voice flat as a board. "I'm done. I don't want this life anymore. You failed me. You failed as a wife and you failed as a mother." Those words hit me like somebody had punched me in the chest with a closed fist. Failed as a wife, failed as a mother, failed. I screamed at him, my voice cracking with every word. Failed. I wake up before the sun every single day for this family. I cook, I clean, I take care of our son. I gave up my entire career for you. How have I failed? Darnell laughed. He actually sat there and laughed at me, y'all. This cold, hollow laugh that made every hair on my body stand up. "Gave up your career?" he said with this nasty smirk. "You act like you were some CEO. You were pushing papers in an HR office, Tamika, and all you've done since then is sit around this house spending my money. Jalen deserves a real parent, someone who can actually contribute something." I tried to stand up, but my legs felt like they were made of water. "You can't take Jalen from me. You can't do this." "This is wrong, Darnell." Darnell leaned forward across that table, his face inches from mine, and what he said next will haunt me until the day I die. "I can and I will," he said, his voice low and poisonous. "My attorney has built a case that you can't beat. We have evidence. We have expert testimony. You're going to walk out of that courtroom with nothing, Tamika. No house, no money, no son, nothing." And then he paused and tilted his head like he was enjoying watching me suffer. "And here's the best part. Your own son is going to stand in front of that judge and tell him exactly what kind of mother you really are." I felt like the floor had opened up underneath me. No, I whispered. Jalen would never say that. He would never. He will, Darnell said, pushing his chair back and standing up, smoothing the front of his shirt. Because he knows the truth. You're not fit to raise him. You never were. He walked out of that dining room like he had just told me the weather forecast. Calm, collected, not a care in the world. He went upstairs to the spare bedroom and locked the door behind him, leaving me crumbled over that table, sobbing so hard I thought my ribs were going to crack. That night was the longest night of my entire life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't form a complete thought. All I could do was sit on the floor of Jalen's room and watch him sleep, terrified that these might be some of the last nights I'd ever get to do this. My boy was laying there with his basketball jersey still on, his mouth slightly open, breathing so peacefully. He had no idea that his daddy was trying to rip our family apart. How could Darnell say that Jalen would testify against me? What had he been telling my son behind my back? What lies had he been planting in my baby's mind when I wasn't in the room? Next morning, I was completely hollow. Darnell acted like absolutely nothing had happened. He woke up, put on another one of his expensive suits, and went downstairs to wake Jalen up for school. He made him breakfast, something he hadn't done in years, and I stood in the hallway watching through the kitchen doorway as he played the role of Father of the Year. "Morning, champ," he said to Jalen, his voice dripping with fake warmth that made my skin crawl. "Daddy made you some eggs and toast. Let's get you fueled up for school." Jalen looked confused. He kept glancing toward the hallway where I was standing like he could sense something was wrong, but Darnell kept redirecting his attention, kept that big fake smile plastered on his face. When they left for school, I was alone in that house and the full weight of everything crashed down on me. I had to fight this. I had to find a way to protect myself and my son, but how? I had absolutely no money of my own. For 11 years, Darnell had controlled every single dollar. He gave me a monthly allowance for groceries, Jalen's school fees, and household supplies. That was it. I had no savings account, no emergency fund, no financial safety net whatsoever. My hands trembling, I grabbed my phone and pulled up our banking app. We had a joint savings account. The one Darnell told me was our family's nest egg, the one that was supposed to be our security blanket. I typed in the password, waited for the screen to load, and when I saw the balance, the room started spinning around me. $0. That account was bone dry, completely empty. No, 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 I kept whispering, pulling the screen down to refresh it over and over, praying it was a glitch, but the number didn't change, 0. I tapped on the transaction history with shaking fingers, and what I saw made me want to throw that phone across the room. For the past 8 months, Darnell had been draining money from our account in massive chunks. $15,000 here, $25,000 there, $12,000, $35,000. The withdrawals were spaced out every few weeks, and every single one was transferred to an account number I had never seen before in my life. The last withdrawal had been made 5 days ago. He had taken the remaining $85,000 from our savings, leaving me with absolutely nothing. Ran upstairs to our bedroom, my heart hammering against my chest. I went to my dresser, the one with the velvet-lined jewelry box that held my wedding band, my mother's gold bracelet that she gave me before she passed, the sapphire earrings Darnell bought me for our 10th anniversary. I opened that box and it was empty. Completely, totally empty except for a few pieces of cheap costume jewelry that weren't worth $10 combined. Everything of value was gone, every piece of real jewelry. Every precious heirloom, gone. He had planned this whole thing for months, maybe even longer. He had systematically drained every account, stolen every valuable thing I owned, stripped me of every last bit of financial security. And then he had the nerve, the absolute audacity, to accuse me of being financially irresponsible in those divorce papers. I sank to the bedroom floor and cried until there was nothing left inside me. I felt so stupid, so blind. So completely and utterly betrayed by the man I had given my entire life to. But even through all that pain, one thought kept pounding in my head like a drum. Jalen, I had to fight for Jalen. Even if I had to fight with my bare hands and nothing else, I had to try. I called an old friend from my HR days, a woman named Portia, and I told her everything, every single detail. She was absolutely horrified. She didn't even let me finish before she started giving me the name of a lawyer. Attorney Vanessa Cole? Portia said she was sharp, she was honest, she genuinely cared about her clients, and she had a reputation for working with people who didn't have the money for those big fancy law firms. The next morning, I scraped together what little cash I had hidden in the zippered pocket of my winter coat and took an Uber to her office. It was in a modest brick building on the east side of town, nothing flashy, nothing intimidating. The moment I met attorney Vanessa Cole, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, a tiny, fragile flicker of hope. Vanessa was a black woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and this calm, steady energy that made you feel like everything might actually be okay. She sat behind her desk, folded her hands, and listened to me tell my entire story from beginning to end without interrupting me once. She took notes on a yellow legal pad. She nodded. She didn't judge me, and when I was finally done talking, when I had cried myself dry right there in her office, she looked me dead in the eyes and said something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "Tamika, your husband isn't just trying to leave you, he's trying to erase you, but I'm telling you right now, we are not going to let that happen. We are going to fight him tooth and nail." I started crying again, but these were different tears, y'all. These were tears of relief. Somebody believed me. Somebody was willing to stand in my corner and fight. Vanessa asked to see the divorce papers Darnell had filed, and I handed them over. She spent about 25 minutes reading through every single page, and I watched her face change. She went from focused to concerned to straight up furious. Her jaw tightened. Her nostrils flared. She set the papers down on her desk and shook her head slowly. "This is ugly, Tamika," she said. "Your husband's attorney is Craig Holden. He's one of the most aggressive family law attorneys in Harris County, and they have put together a very deliberate case against you. At least on paper, it looks strong." She turned the documents toward me and started walking me through the evidence they had compiled. First, the photographs. There were pictures of my house looking like an absolute disaster zone, dishes piled high in the kitchen sink, Jalen's clothes and toys thrown all over the living room floor, trash overflowing from the garbage can. Bathroom looking filthy, beds unmade with sheets tangled up everywhere. These photos were taken when I was dealing with a back injury, I said, my voice rising because the anger was finally starting to push through the pain. I threw out my back carrying groceries up the porch steps. I could barely walk for almost 2 weeks. I was on muscle relaxers and heating pads. Darnell knew I was hurt. He watched me struggling to even get off the couch. But did he lift a finger to help? No. He said he had too much going on at work. Of course, the house was a mess. I could barely stand up straight. Vanessa nodded, her expression full of understanding. I believe you, Tamika, every word, but you need to understand that in a courtroom, these photos are going to be powerful. They'll use them to make you look neglectful and lazy. Context doesn't show up in a photograph. Then she showed me the credit card statements, and y'all, my eyes almost fell out of my head. Thousands and thousands of dollars in charges, designer shoes from Nordstrom, expensive watches from a jewelry store I'd never set foot in, spa packages at some luxury resort I'd never even heard of, fancy steakhouse dinners that I definitely never ate. I didn't buy any of this, I said, my voice climbing higher with every word. I have never in my life bought a pair of designer shoes. I don't even know where half these places are. I shop at Target and Walmart, that's it. This was a secondary card issued in your name, correct? Vanessa asked, tapping the statement with her pen. Yes, but Darnell had it. He told me he needed to use it sometimes because his corporate card had restrictions on certain purchases. He said it was temporary. I trusted him. I never once checked those statements because he told me he was handling all the bills. Vanessa took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. Tamika, he set you up. Every single one of these purchases was made on a card in your name so that when this went to court, it would look like you were the one blowing through money while he was working to support the family. The realization hit me like a truck going 70 miles an hour. Every time Darnell had said, "Don't worry about the finances, baby, I got it." Every time he took that card out of the drawer saying he forgot his wallet. Every time he told me not to bother looking at the statements because it was just boring numbers. It was all part of his plan. Every single bit of it was designed to frame me. But the worst part, y'all, the absolute worst part was still coming. Vanessa pulled out a thick document with a blue cover and placed it on the desk between us. She looked at me with this serious expression that made my stomach drop to the floor. This is the most dangerous piece of evidence they have against you, Tamika. It's an evaluation report from a child behavioral specialist named Dr. Raymond Price. I picked up the report and started reading. And with every single sentence I felt sicker and sicker, like the walls of that office were closing in on me. Dr. Raymond Price claimed he had conducted covert behavioral observations of me and Jalen over a 4-month period. He said he had watched us at the park, at the grocery store, at the mall, at Jalen's basketball games. His findings were absolutely devastating. He claimed I was emotionally erratic and prone to outbursts. He said I grabbed Jalen's arm with unnecessary force in a parking lot and caused the child visible distress. He said I spent excessive time on my phone while Jalen was left unsupervised on a playground. He said when Jalen tripped during a basketball game, my reaction was so dramatic and hysterical that it embarrassed the child and caused him additional psychological stress. His professional conclusion was that I exhibited signs of severe emotional dysregulation and that I projected my personal unhappiness onto my son in ways that were detrimental to his psychological development. He recommended that full custody be granted to Darnell for the child's emotional safety and long-term well-being. I threw that report across the room so hard it hit the wall. "This is lies," I shouted, my whole body shaking with fury. Every single word in that report is a complete and total lie. I have never hurt my son. I have never neglected my son. Who is this man? I have never seen this person in my entire life. "Do you know him?" Vanessa asked carefully. "Have you ever met Dr. Raymond Price?" "No," I said firmly. "Never. I've never heard that name before today. If he was supposedly watching me for 4 months, how come I never once saw him? How is that possible?" Vanessa leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. "That's what makes this so dangerous, Tamika. His credentials check out. He's a licensed behavioral specialist with over 15 years of experience. He's published research papers. He's testified in court before. On paper, he looks completely legitimate. And covert observation is a recognized technique in his field. The judge is going to take his testimony very, very seriously." I sat there feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under my feet all over again. Fake photographs taken when I was injured. Fake credit card charges made in my name. And now a fake psychological report from a man I'd never met claiming I was an unfit mother. How was I supposed to fight all of this? I had nothing. No money, no evidence, no proof of anything I was saying. "I can't afford you," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Darnell took everything. I have maybe $150 in cash stuffed in my coat pocket. That's literally all I have in this world. Vanessa was quiet for a moment, then she reached across the desk and put her hand on top of mine. "Let's not worry about payment right now," she said firmly. "What we need to worry about is building your defense. This case has already been filed. We have a deadline to respond and then we're heading to trial. We need to move fast." For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely alone in this fight. But things at home, y'all, things at home got so much worse. Darnell didn't move out of the house. He stayed right there, sleeping in that spare bedroom down the hall, and he made my daily life a living nightmare. Every single day was a new form of torture designed to break me down piece by piece. He started showering Jalen with expensive gifts. Brand new PlayStation 5 with every game you could imagine. A pair of Jordan sneakers that cost more than my entire monthly grocery budget. A professional-grade basketball signed by some NBA player. A drone that Jalen had been begging for since his last birthday. New clothes, new gadgets, new everything, piling up in Jalen's room like it was Christmas morning every single day. And every time he gave Jalen something, he made absolutely sure I was watching. He'd make this big grand production out of it right in front of me. Here you go, champ, daddy's got you. Daddy always makes sure you have the best of everything. Not like some people who can't even afford to buy you new sneakers. He'd say it with this wide grin on his face, and Jalen would be so excited about whatever new thing he was holding that he wouldn't even catch the cruelty hiding behind his daddy's words. But I caught it, y'all. Oh, I caught every single dig, every single jab. Every single carefully placed insult designed to make me look small and worthless in my own son's eyes. He started undermining me at every single turn. If I cooked dinner, he'd push the plate to the side and shake his head. This is kind of dry, don't you think, Jay? Tell you what, let daddy order us some real food. I'll get us that steak place you like. If I sat down to help Jalen with his math homework, Darnell would slide right in between us and take over. Ah, champ, that's not how you do it. Your mom's got it all wrong. Let me show you the right way. If I told Jalen to turn off the PlayStation and get ready for bed, Darnell would wave his hand and say, "He's fine, Tamika. Let the boy play. Stop being so uptight all the time. You're always nagging." Every single day, y'all, every single day he was chipping away at my authority as a mother, making Jalen question me, making Jalen doubt me. Making Jalen think that I was the problem in our family and that daddy was the hero who could do no wrong. And the worst part, I could see it working. My sweet boy started looking at me differently. There was confusion in his eyes, hesitation, like he didn't know who to trust anymore. Like he was being pulled in two directions and didn't understand why. One evening, after Darnell had taken Jalen to some arcade without even telling me they were leaving, they came home laughing and carrying bags full of prizes. Jalen ran up to his room to play with his new stuff, and about an hour later, he came into my bedroom. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, trying not to cry. He climbed up next to me and put his little hand on my arm. "Mom, why are you always so sad now?" He asked, his voice so small and worried that it nearly split me in half. I wiped my eyes quick and tried to put on a smile. "I'm okay, baby. Mama's just tired, that's all." "Dad says you're not feeling well," Jalen said quietly, and my entire body went rigid. He told me that sometimes moms get really tired and they need a break. He said if I went to live with him for a while, you could rest and feel better. The room tilted sideways. Darnell had been poisoning my son's mind. It was making Jalen believe that leaving me would actually be helping me, that abandoning his mother was some kind of act of love. I pulled Jalen into my arms and held him so tight I could feel his heartbeat against my chest. "Baby, listen to me carefully. I am not sick. Mama is just going through a hard time right now, but I love you more than anything on this entire planet. Do you hear me? More than anything. Nothing is ever going to change that." Jalen hugged me back, but I could feel it. A tiny seed of doubt that Darnell had planted. It was already growing roots. The damage was already being done. That night, after Jalen fell asleep, I went to his room to pull the covers up over his shoulders. He always kicked them off in his sleep. And that's when I noticed something strange. Tucked underneath his pillow, barely visible, was the corner of an old tablet. It was the small Amazon Fire tablet he used to have before Darnell bought him the PlayStation and the new iPad. The screen was scratched up and the case was cracked. It barely held a charge anymore. Why was he keeping that old thing under his pillow? Darnell had bought him every piece of new technology a kid could dream of. Why would this beat-up old tablet be so important that he was sleeping with it right next to his head every single night? I stood there staring at it for a long time, confused. But I was so emotionally drained, so mentally exhausted from everything that had happened that I didn't think too hard about it. I just kissed Jalen on the forehead and went back to my room. I didn't know it then, y'all. I had no idea. But my son had been carrying the key to everything underneath that pillow the whole time. About 10 days before our court date, something happened that showed me exactly how deep Darnell's evil ran. I was in the kitchen cutting up fruit for Jalen's after-school snack when I heard Darnell's car pull into the driveway. But it was only 1:30 in the afternoon. Jalen's school didn't let out until 3:15. I looked through the kitchen window and saw Darnell stepping out of the car with Jalen right beside him. They were both grinning, and Jalen was wearing a brand new Houston Rockets jersey and carrying a foam finger and a half-eaten bag of cotton candy. I rushed outside, my heart pounding. "What's going on? Why isn't Jalen at school? What happened?" Darnell gave me that smirk, that smug, self-satisfied smirk that I had grown to absolutely despise. "Relax, Tamika." I pulled him out early, took him to the Rockets game. They had a noon tip-off. He had the time of his life. "Right, champ?" Jalen nodded excitedly, bouncing on his toes. "Mom, we had courtside seats, courtside, and I got a jersey signed by the point guard. You pulled him out of school without telling me," said, trying to keep my voice steady even though every nerve in my body was on fire. "You can't just do that, Darnell. I'm his mother, you have to tell me." "And I'm his father," Darnell shot back, his voice turning cold as ice. "I don't need to run anything by you. I can spend time with my son whenever I want." That's when I smelled it, that scent, not his aftershave, something else, a perfume. Sweet, heavy, floral. It was clinging to his shirt collar, to his jacket, to the air around him. Same perfume I had been catching faint traces of on his clothes for months. But this time it was strong, overpowering, like whoever was wearing it had been pressed right up against him. "Who were you with?" I demanded, my voice trembling. Darnell walked right past me toward the house, guiding Jalen ahead of him, but he stopped at the front door and turned back. He looked at me with this wicked little smile, and he spoke quietly enough that Jalen couldn't hear. "You finally catching on, Tamika?" he whispered. "Took you long enough? She's everything you could never be, smart, successful, beautiful, and she actually knows how to make a man happy. Pretty soon she's going to be the one raising our son." I couldn't breathe. I literally could not pull air into my lungs. Another woman. There was another woman this whole time, and Darnell wasn't just planning to leave me for her. He was planning to replace me entirely. As his wife, as Jalen's mother, as everything. He walked inside and shut the door, leaving me standing alone in that driveway, feeling like somebody had reached into my chest and ripped my heart out with their bare hands. Everything made sense now, y'all. The late nights, the aftershave, the perfume, the whispered phone calls, the locked phone. There was another woman, and Darnell had been building a whole new life with her while I was at home making his breakfast and raising his son. The court-ordered mediation was an absolute catastrophe. was supposed to be an opportunity for both sides to sit down like reasonable adults, talk things through, and maybe, just maybe, come to some kind of agreement without dragging everything into a full trial. But Darnell had zero intention of being reasonable about anything. We sat in a small conference room at the mediator's office, me and attorney Vanessa on one side of the table, Darnell and his lawyer, Craig Holden, on the other side. Court-appointed mediator sat at the head of the table trying to keep everything civil. Vanessa started calmly and professionally. My client is willing to be fair and reasonable in these proceedings. Tamika is simply asking for joint custody of Jalen and an equitable division of the marital assets. She is open to discussing the specific terms and arrangements. Before Vanessa could even take her next breath, Craig Holden cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. There's absolutely nothing to discuss here, Holden said, his voice hard as concrete. He was a tall man with slick-back gray hair and a suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He spoke with this arrogant, condescending tone that made every muscle in my body tense up. He slammed a thick manila folder onto the table so hard I flinched. Mrs. Reynolds has demonstrated a clear and consistent pattern of failure in this marriage, Holden continued, his voice dripping with contempt. We have photographic evidence, we have financial documentation, and we have expert psychological testimony that conclusively proves she is unfit as both a spouse and as a parent. That is not true, I started to say, but Vanessa gently placed her hand on my forearm, silently telling me to stay calm. Don't give them what they want, her eyes said. Don't let them see you break. Holden ignored me completely and kept going like I hadn't even opened my mouth. Our client is being more than generous by offering Mrs. Reynolds the chance to walk away from this marriage quietly and with some small measure of dignity intact. If she signs the settlement agreement we've prepared, she can avoid a public trial that will only serve to humiliate her further. What agreement? Vanessa asked, though I could tell from the edge in her voice that she already knew it wasn't going to be anything close to fair. Holden reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stapled document. He slid it across the table like he was serving a death sentence. Vanessa and I leaned in and read it together, and with every line I felt the blood draining from my face. The agreement gave Darnell full and sole custody of Jalen. I would be allowed supervised visitation only, 2 hours every other Saturday with a court-appointed supervisor present the entire time, like I was some kind of criminal who couldn't be trusted alone with her own child. I would receive none of the marital asset. No portion of the house, no share of the savings, no claim to any of the investments, nothing. I would leave the marriage with only my personal clothing and belongings. This is insanity, I said, unable to hold it in any longer. My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. You want to take my son away from me and throw me out on the street with nothing? After 11 years, after everything I sacrificed. Darnell finally spoke, and y'all, his voice was so calm, so rehearsed, so perfectly measured, like he had practiced this exact speech in front of a mirror. Tamika, I'm doing what's best for Jalen. He needs stability. He needs a parent who can provide for him emotionally and financially. You've shown over and over again that you can't do either. I'm trying to protect our son. I am his mother, I screamed, tears pouring down my face. I have been there for him every single day of his life. Every homework assignment, every basketball game, every doctor's appointment, every nightmare in the middle of the night, that was me, not you, me. And this is precisely the behavior we're concerned about, Holden said, gesturing at me like I was some kind of exhibit in a museum. Emotional volatility, inability to regulate her reactions. This is entirely consistent with the findings in Dr. Price's professional evaluation. The mediator held up both hands, trying to restore order. Perhaps we can find some middle ground that works for both? There is no middle ground, Holden interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Mrs. Reynolds can sign this agreement today or she can face us in court, and I assure you what we present at trial will be significantly more damaging than anything she's seen so far. Darnell stood up from his chair, buttoning his suit jacket with one hand. He looked down at me with those cold, dead eyes and said, "This is your last chance, Tamika. Take the deal or lose everything in front of a judge, your choice." And then they left, just stood up and walked out of that room like they owned the entire building, like the whole thing was already settled, like I had already lost. Vanessa and I sat there in that empty conference room in complete silence for what felt like an eternity. The air felt heavy. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Finally, Vanessa turned to me. Her expression was serious, but there was fire in her eyes. "Tamika, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. We are facing an uphill battle. They have manufactured evidence that looks very convincing to a judge who doesn't know the real story. They have a credentialed expert witness. They have a high-powered attorney who knows exactly how to manipulate a courtroom." She paused and took a breath. "But I believe you. I believe every single word you've told me. And we are going to walk into that courtroom and we are going to fight for your son with everything we have. Do you hear me? What if we lose?" I whispered, my voice so small it barely made a sound. "What if they take Jalen from me?" "We are not going to lose," Vanessa said, her voice solid as steel. "We are going to show that judge exactly who you are and exactly what your husband has done." I wanted to believe her, y'all. I wanted to believe her so badly. Sitting there in that cold conference room with those impossible demands still spread out on the table in front of me, I couldn't stop the question that kept circling around and around in my head like a vulture. How do you fight against lies when the lies look more real than the truth? How do you prove who you really are when someone has spent months building a fake version of you that looks so convincing on paper? How do you win when the other side has money, power, a ruthless attorney, and a so-called expert witness, and all you have is your word and a lawyer who took your case out of the goodness of her heart? I didn't have answers to any of those questions. All I had was a mother's love for her child and the desperate, burning refusal to let them take him from me. I prayed that night harder than I had ever prayed in my life. I got down on my knees beside my bed and I begged God to protect my son. Protect me? To let the truth come out somehow, some way, even when the truth seemed buried so deep underneath all those lies that nobody would ever be able to find it. I didn't know it yet, but the answer to my prayer was sleeping right down the hall with an old cracked tablet tucked underneath his pillow. The first day of trial was one of the most terrifying experiences of my entire life. The courtroom was this massive, intimidating room with tall ceilings and dark wood paneling covering every wall. Judge sat elevated on this high platform behind a wide bench that made him look like he was towering over all of us. Everything about that room was designed to make you feel tiny and powerless and insignificant. And that's exactly how I felt, tiny, powerless, like an ant standing in the middle of a football field waiting to be stepped on. Darnell sat on the other side of the courtroom with Craig Holden, and I tell you y'all, he looked like a man who had already collected his trophy. Relaxed. Confident, legs crossed, not a single crease of worry on his face. He didn't even look in my direction, not once. To him, I was already gone, already erased from the picture, already replaced. Attorney Holden stood up for his opening statement, and I had to sit there, hands clenched in my lap, while he systematically tore my character to shreds in front of a room full of complete strangers. Your Honor, Holden began, his deep voice echoing off those high ceilings. This is a straightforward case about a devoted father who is simply trying to provide his son with the safe, stable, and nurturing environment that the boy's mother has consistently failed to provide. He clicked a remote and the photographs appeared on the large display screen mounted on the courtroom wall. My filthy kitchen, my trashed living room, the overflowing garbage can, the unmade beds, the dirty bathroom. Every ugly, humiliating image blown up for everyone to see. While Mr. Reynolds worked 60+ hours per week to financially support his family, Holden continued, pacing slowly in front of the screen, his wife could not even maintain the most basic standards of household cleanliness and order. These photographs reveal a clear and disturbing pattern of domestic neglect and indifference. I wanted to scream, y'all. I wanted to jump out of my seat and tell everyone that those photos were taken during the worst week of my back injury, when I could barely make it from the bed to the bathroom without crying from the pain. But I had to sit there, silent still, while he painted me as some kind of lazy, neglectful monster. Then came the credit card statements. Holden projected them onto the screen, highlighting charge after charge with a bright red laser pointer. Designer shoes, expensive watches, spa weekends. Steakhouse dinners, the numbers kept climbing higher and higher. Mrs. Reynolds accumulated over $60,000 in personal luxury purchases within a single year, Holden announced, his voice thick with manufactured outrage. While her husband sacrificed and worked to build a secure future for their son, she was draining their family's resources on handbags and spa treatments without a single thought for anyone but herself. Lies, every single word was a lie. Sitting there on that screen with all those official-looking numbers and dates and store names, it looked so real, so convincing, so damning. Vanessa stood up for her opening statement and she did her best, y'all, she really did. She told my side of the story with passion and clarity. She explained how I had given up my career to be a full-time mother, how I had dedicated over a decade of my life to raising Jalen and maintaining our home. How the photographs had been taken completely out of context during a period when I was physically incapacitated. How Darnell had controlled every aspect of our finances and had used my credit card for his own purchases without my knowledge, but I could see it on the judge's face. His expression didn't shift the way it had shifted during Holden's presentation. Vanessa's words were landing differently, lighter, less impactful, because Holden had shown physical evidence, photograph. Financial documents, hard proof you could see and touch and point to. Vanessa had my story, my word against his evidence, and in a courtroom, y'all, evidence wins every single time. Then came the moment I had been dreading more than anything else. The moment that had kept me up every night for 2 weeks straight, staring at the ceiling in the dark, sick to my stomach with fear. Attorney Holden straightened his tie, looked at the judge, and announced in that booming voice, "Your Honor, the plaintiff calls his expert witness, Dr. Raymond Price." The courtroom doors opened and a man walked in. And y'all, when I saw him, every drop of blood in my body turned to ice. He was tall, well-built, with a neatly trimmed beard and wire-framed glasses that made him look scholarly and distinguished. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit with a pale blue tie. Carried a leather portfolio under one arm and walked with this smooth, easy confidence like he had done this 1,000 times before. He looked every bit like a respected, credible professional whose word you would trust without question. But as he passed by me on his way to the witness stand, I caught it, that scent, that sweet, heavy floral perfume, the same perfume that had been haunting me for months. It was on him, faint but unmistakable, mixed in with his cologne, clinging to his jacket. Someone wearing that perfume had been very, very close to him recently. My hands went numb. My heart was slamming against my ribcage so hard I could feel it in my throat. Wait, if the perfume I'd been smelling on Darnell was the same perfume now lingering on Dr. Raymond Price, then that meant the other woman, Darnell's mistress, she was connected to both of them. She was the thread tying this whole thing together. My mind was racing so fast I could barely see straight. I grabbed Vanessa's arm and leaned in close, whispering so urgently my lips were practically touching her ear. That perfume, on him, it's the same perfume I've been smelling on Darnell's clothes for months, the same one. That means the woman Darnell's been seeing is connected to this man. They're all connected. Vanessa's eyes widened. She scribbled something on her legal pad in quick, sharp strokes, but I could see the concern pulling at the corners of her mouth. Even if she believed me, and I know she did, proving a connection through a perfume wasn't something you could present as evidence. We had no photographs, no text messages, no proof. Dr. Raymond Price raised his right hand, placed his left on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help him God. And then he sat down in that witness chair and proceeded to tell lie after lie after lie about me and my son. Attorney Holden began his questioning, and Dr. Price's voice was smooth as silk, measured, professional, the kind of voice that made you want to believe every word coming out of his mouth. Dr. Price, would you please describe your professional qualifications for the court? Certainly, Dr. Price said, adjusting his glasses. I hold a doctorate in behavioral psychology from Rice University. I have been a licensed behavioral specialist for 17 years, focusing specifically on child development, family systems, and parental fitness assessments. I have authored 12 peer-reviewed publications and have been accepted as an expert witness in family court proceedings across the state of Texas on numerous occasions. Everything he said was probably true, and that's what made the lies that were about to come out of his mouth 100 times more dangerous. And Dr. Price, did you conduct behavioral observations of Mrs. Tamika Reynolds and her son Jalen? Yes, I did, he said, opening his leather portfolio with practiced ease. I conducted covert behavioral observations over a 4-month period, from June through September of this year. I observed their interactions across multiple naturalistic settings including public parks, retail establishments, the child's sporting events, and school dismissal locations. And what were your findings? Dr. Price looked down at his notes like he was about to present the results of some important scientific study. And then he started lying, lying about me, lying about my relationship with my son, lying with a straight face and a calm voice and a PhD behind his name. My mouth went dry, my palms were soaked with sweat. And all I could do was sit there and listen while this man I had never met in my life told a judge that I was unfit to raise my own child. My observations revealed a deeply troubling pattern of behavior from Mrs. Reynolds, Dr. Price said in that calm, clinical voice that made every lie sound like a scientific fact. He flipped to the first page of his notes. On June 22nd, I observed Mrs. Reynolds and Jalen at a Walmart supercenter on Highway 6. When the child attempted to show his mother an item he was interested in, Mrs. Reynolds seized the child's wrist with disproportionate force and spoke to him in an aggressive, elevated tone. The child showed visible signs of distress, pulling away and beginning to cry. Rather than addressing the child's emotional state, Mrs. Reynolds appeared irritated and physically dragged the child through the store by his arm. My jaw dropped open. That never happened, not even close to how he described it. What actually happened was Jalen almost knocked over an entire display of glass picture frames because he was running through the aisle. I grabbed his wrist to stop him before everything came crashing down and someone got hurt. I didn't yank him. I didn't drag him. I caught him. And yes, I told him firmly that he needed to slow down in the store because that's what mothers do. That's what responsible parents do. And I hugged him right after and we laughed about it. But that's not what this man told the judge. Dr. Price continued, and every word was like a blade being twisted deeper into my chest. On August 8th, I observed Mrs. Reynolds and Jalen at Memorial Park. Mrs. Reynolds sat on a bench and remained absorbed in her cellular device for approximately 25 minutes while the child played unsupervised on the playground equipment. No point during this period did Mrs. Reynolds visually check on the child or engage with him in any way. Another lie, I was sitting on that bench texting Portia about whether the community center had openings for their after-school tutoring program because Jalen had been struggling with his reading comprehension. I was on my phone for maybe 3 minutes tops, and I was watching Jalen the entire time. My eyes never left that playground, not for 1 second. During this same observation, Dr. Price went on, his voice never wavering, the child fell from the monkey bars. Mrs. Reynolds' reaction was disproportionate and highly alarming. Rather than calmly approaching the child to assess for injury, she ran toward him screaming, which significantly escalated the child's fear response. This type of parental overreaction can be more psychologically damaging to a child than the physical injury itself, as it teaches the child that the world is inherently dangerous and that the parent cannot be relied upon for calm, stable support. I was gripping the edge of my chair so hard my fingernails were digging into the wood. I ran to my son because he fell. He was 7 feet in the air on those monkey bars and he fell. What mother in her right mind would casually stroll over? What mother wouldn't run? What mother wouldn't be scared? He was twisting my love for my son, my natural protective instinct, into some kind of mental illness. Dr. Price closed his portfolio and looked directly at the judge with this expression of grave concern that he had clearly perfected over years of doing this. Based on my extensive observations and professional expertise, it is my clinical conclusion that Mrs. Tamika Reynolds exhibits significant markers of emotional dysregulation, inconsistent parental responsiveness, and poor impulse control. She demonstrates a pattern of projecting her own psychological distress onto her child, creating an unstable and emotionally volatile home environment. He folded his hands on the rail of the witness stand. In my professional opinion, Your Honor, the minor child Jalen would be better served, psychologically, emotionally, and developmentally, by residing primarily with his father, Mr. Darnell Reynolds, who has demonstrated stable, consistent, and nurturing parenting behaviors. I strongly recommend full custody be granted to the father. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming through the vents. His testimony had been flawless, polished, practiced to perfection. He sounded like a concerned scientist delivering a tragic but unavoidable diagnosis, not like a fraud working with his lover's boyfriend to steal a child from his mother. I glanced at the judge and my stomach turned inside out. He was nodding slowly, writing notes, clearly absorbing every poisonous word that had come out of Dr. Price's mouth. Vanessa stood up for cross-examination and she tried her absolute hardest, She really went after him. Dr. Price, these covert observations you conducted, were they authorized by Mrs. Reynolds? Did she consent to being studied or evaluated in any way? Dr. Price didn't even blink. Covert observation is a widely accepted and well-established methodology in my field, he said smoothly. The value of this approach lies in its ability to capture authentic, unguarded behavior. Subjects who are aware of being observed tend to modify their behavior, which compromises the validity of the data. But you were retained and compensated by Mr. Reynolds for this evaluation, were you not? Vanessa pressed. I was compensated for my professional services, yes, Dr. Price responded without missing a beat. However, my findings are based entirely on direct observation and clinical analysis. My conclusions are objective and would be the same regardless of which party retained my services. He had an answer for everything, y'all. Smooth, rehearsed, airtight. Vanessa asked several more pointed questions, trying to find a crack in his armor, but he deflected every single one with the ease of someone who had been doing this for a very long time. The judge seemed satisfied with every response. When he finally stepped down from the witness stand, he walked past me again, and I swear on everything I love, I saw the faintest flicker of a smirk cross his lips. So quick you'd miss it if you blinked, but I didn't blink, I saw it, he knew he'd won. He knew his lies had landed exactly where they were supposed to. The second day of trial was even worse. It was my turn to take the stand, and I was more terrified than I had ever been in my entire life. Vanessa had warned me. She had sat me down the night before and looked me straight in the eyes. Tamika, listen to me very carefully. Craig Holden is going to try to provoke you tomorrow. He's going to push every button you have. He's going to say things that make you want to scream, things that make you want to cry, and that's exactly what he wants. He wants you to have an emotional outburst in front of that judge so you look exactly like the unstable woman Dr. Price described. Do not give him that satisfaction. No matter what he says, stay calm. Vanessa examined me first, and she was gentle. She walked me through my daily routine, my relationship with Jalen, the sacrifices I had made. I explained everything truthfully. The photographs, the credit card charges, the context behind every piece of evidence they had twisted against me. I had a severe back injury, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady even though my insides were trembling. I could barely walk for 2 weeks. I was on medication. Darnell knew I was hurt. He saw me struggling every single day, but he refused to help with anything around the house. He said his schedule at work was too demanding. Those photos were taken during the worst of it. The moment I could stand up without crying, I cleaned everything. I explained the credit card situation. That card was in my name, but Darnell had possession of it. He told me he needed a backup card because his corporate card had purchasing restrictions. I trusted him. I never reviewed the statements because he told me he handled all the bills. I had no idea he was making those purchases. I was doing okay. I was holding it together. Vanessa gave me a small, encouraging nod when she finished her questions, and then Craig Holden rose from his chair. And I knew, y'all, I knew in my bones that the next few minutes were going to determine the rest of my life. Craig Holden walked toward me slowly, deliberately, like a predator who had already spotted the weakest point on his prey. His expensive leather shoes clicked against the courtroom floor with each step. Stopped about 5 feet from the witness stand and looked at me with this expression of polite skepticism that somehow felt more threatening than outright hostility. Mrs. Reynolds, he began, his voice deceptively gentle, you're asking this court to believe that your husband, a respected financial professional with an impeccable reputation, suddenly decided to orchestrate an elaborate conspiracy against you, fake photographs, fake credit card charges, a fake expert witness. Is that your testimony? It's not fake, I said, gripping the armrests of the witness chair. It's real. Everything I've told this court is the truth. He took those photos when he knew I was injured. He used my credit card without telling me what he was buying. He set all of this up. How convenient, Holden said with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. So according to you, absolutely nothing is your responsibility. The state of your home, your husband's fault for photographing it at an unflattering moment. $60,000 in luxury purchases, your husband's fault for using your card. You bear no accountability whatsoever for any of it. That's not what I'm saying, I replied, feeling my pulse start to quicken. I'm not claiming I'm perfect. I'm just saying he manipulated the situation to make me look bad. He planned this. Do you have any evidence of this alleged manipulation? Holden interrupted, tilting his head like he was genuinely curious. Any documentation? Any witnesses, anything at all beyond your own accusations? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I had nothing, no proof, just my word against mountains of manufactured evidence. No, I finally whispered. I don't have proof, but I know what happened. You know, Holden repeated, his voice dripping with condescension. Mrs. Reynolds, this is a court of law. We deal in evidence here. Facts, documentation, not feelings, not suspicions, not theories. He turned and walked back toward his table, picking up a large photograph that made my stomach drop the instant I recognized it. He held it up for the judge to see before turning it toward me. It was a picture of me in my bedroom. My hair was wild and tangled. My face was red and swollen from crying. My mouth was open mid-scream, frozen in a moment of pure anguish. I looked absolutely unhinged in that photograph, completely out of control. Mrs. Reynolds, Holden said, holding the photograph like it was Exhibit A in a murder trial. Can you please explain this image to the court? The tears started falling before I could stop them. I remembered that night so vividly it felt like it had happened yesterday. It was about a month before Darnell filed those divorce papers. He had come home late, reeking of that perfume, and when I finally worked up the courage to ask him where he'd been, he had turned on me like a snake. He told me I was pathetic. He told me I was boring. He told me no man in his right mind would want to come home to someone like me. He told me I was a terrible wife and an even worse mother. He said Jalen deserved better. He said Jalen needed a real mother, not some unemployed housewife who couldn't even keep herself together. He had said those things calmly, y'all, with a smile on his face, like he was enjoying watching me crumble. And when I finally broke down, when the pain and the humiliation became too much and I started sobbing and screaming for him to stop, to please just stop saying those horrible things, he pulled out his phone and took that picture. Mrs. Reynolds, Holden pressed, his voice sharper now, we're waiting for an explanation. That night, I said through my tears, my voice cracking with every word, Darnell came home and said terrible things to me. He told me I was worthless. He told me I was a failure. He told me our son would be better off without me. He kept going and going until I couldn't take it anymore. And when I finally broke down, when I was at my absolute lowest, he took that picture. So you admit you were screaming hysterically? Holden pounced immediately, circling back toward me like a shark smelling blood. You admit you lost control of your emotions, exactly as Dr. Price described in his professional assessment. You admit you're prone to emotional outbursts. Provoked me, I shouted, my voice rising despite every warning Vanessa had given me. He emotionally abused me for months. He said cruel, hateful things to destroy me. He planned this whole thing. Mrs. Reynolds, please lower your voice, the judge interjected, his tone stern and disapproving. But I couldn't stop. All the pain, all the betrayal, all the months of being gaslit and manipulated and torn apart, it all came flooding out like a dam had burst. Don't you see what he's doing? I screamed, standing up from the witness chair. He's been seeing another woman. That expert witness is connected to her somehow. They're all working together to steal my son. He emptied our bank accounts. He stole my jewelry. He's been poisoning Jalen's mind against me. This whole thing is a setup. Every single piece of it is a lie. Mrs. Reynolds, sit down immediately, the judge commanded, banging his gavel hard against the bench. I collapsed back into the chair, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. Sobs racked my chest so violently I couldn't catch my breath. I looked up through my tears and saw exactly what I had feared most. The judge was staring at me with an expression that was impossible to misread. He had seen me lose control. He had seen me scream and cry and fall apart right there on the witness stand. He had seen exactly what Darnell and Holden wanted him to see. I looked across the courtroom at Darnell. He was sitting with his head slightly bowed, his brow furrowed in this perfect expression of sad concern, like my outburst had wounded him. Like I was the one causing pain, like he was the victim. And sitting in the gallery directly behind him, I finally saw her. A woman I hadn't noticed before, elegant, perfectly styled dark hair, designer dress, manicured hands folded neatly in her lap, and on her face, just barely visible, was the smallest, most satisfied smile. She was the source of that perfume. I knew it in my bones, and she had just watched me destroy my own case. Craig Holden walked back to his table, practically glowing with satisfaction. No further questions, Your Honor. Vanessa tried to repair the damage in her redirect examination. She asked me clarifying questions, gave me opportunities to explain my emotional state, tried to remind the judge about the context of everything that had happened. There was no coming back from what I had just done. When we left the courtroom that afternoon, Vanessa put her hand on my shoulder. Her expression was gentle but heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Tamika, she said quietly, tomorrow is the final day. The judge will make his ruling. I need you to prepare yourself based on what happened today. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. We both knew what was coming. I had played right into their hands. I had become exactly what they said I was, and tomorrow I was going to lose my son. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling for hours. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think about anything except what was going to happen when that judge brought down his gavel. I had nothing left, no evidence, no defense, no hope, at least that's what I thought. Around 2:00 in the morning, when sleep refused to come no matter how hard I prayed for it, I got out of bed and walked down the hallway to Jalen's room. I needed to see him. I needed to be close to him. I needed to memorize every single detail of his face because I didn't know how many more nights I would be able to do this. I pushed his door open slowly, careful not to make a sound. The nightlight in the corner cast a soft blue glow across the room. Jalen was sleeping on his side, his favorite basketball tucked under one arm, his mouth slightly open, his chest rising and falling in that peaceful rhythm that only sleeping children have. I sat down on the edge of his bed as gently as I could, just watching him breathe. My sweet boy, my whole world. 11 years of waking up in the middle of the night to check on him. 11 years of packing his lunches and helping with his homework and cheering at his games. 11 years of being his mother, the only thing I had ever done in my life that truly mattered. And tomorrow, some judge who didn't know us, who had never seen us laugh together or cry together or hug each other after a bad day, was going to decide that I didn't deserve to keep him. Tears started rolling down my cheeks. I couldn't stop them. I didn't even try. I reached out and gently stroked Jalen's hair, brushing it back from his forehead the way I had done 1,000 times before. I love you so much, baby boy, I whispered, my voice barely audible. No matter what happens tomorrow, please don't ever forget that. Mama loves you more than anything in this entire universe. He stirred slightly in his sleep, shifting onto his back, and that's when I saw it again. The corner of that old tablet peeking out from underneath his pillow. I froze. That same cracked, beat-up tablet that Jalen had stopped using months ago when Darnell bought him all that fancy new electronics. Why was it still under his pillow? Every single night for weeks now, that tablet had been right there beside his head while he slept. Why? Something in my gut told me I needed to know what was on that device, but I couldn't bring myself to take it, not without his permission. He was my son, I trusted him. Whatever he was keeping on there, it was his business, but the question kept circling in my mind. Could possibly be on that old tablet that was important enough for him to sleep with it every single night? I bent down and kissed Jalen's forehead softly. I'll always fight for you, I whispered. Always. Then I went back to my room and laid awake until the sun came up, watching the ceiling and waiting for the worst day of my life to begin. The morning of Judgment Day arrived cold and gray. The sky outside was heavy with clouds, like even the weather knew something terrible was about to happen. I got dressed in the nicest thing I owned, a simple black dress I had worn to my mother's funeral 3 years ago. It felt appropriate somehow, like I was mourning something all over again, like I was about to bury the life I had known. Vanessa picked me up at 8:30. The drive to the courthouse was mostly silent. She tried to offer words of encouragement, but we both knew the truth. After my breakdown on the witness stand, after everything the judge had seen and heard, the odds were stacked so high against us that hoping for a victory felt almost delusional. Just stay calm today, Vanessa said as we pulled into the parking garage. Whatever happens in that courtroom, keep your composure. Don't give them anything else to use against you. I nodded, but inside I felt hollow, empty. Someone had scooped out everything that made me who I was and left nothing behind but a shell. We walked into the courthouse and made our way to the courtroom. The hallways were busy with lawyers and clerks and people waiting for their own cases to be called, but I barely saw any of them. Everything felt muted, like I was walking through a dream. When we entered the courtroom, Darnell and Craig Holden were already seated at the plaintiff's table. Darnell looked freshly groomed and confident, wearing yet another expensive suit, his posture relaxed and easy. Holden was reviewing documents, occasionally leaning over to whisper something in Darnell's ear. And there she was again, the woman from yesterday, sitting in the gallery behind Darnell, wearing a different designer outfit today, her legs crossed elegantly, her hands folded in her lap. She caught me looking at her and held my gaze for a long moment before turning away with the faintest hint of a smile. I wanted to scream. I wanted to point at her and tell the judge everything I suspected. But what good would it do? I had no proof. I had nothing. The bailiff called the courtroom to order and we all rose as the judge entered. He was an older man with gray hair and a stern, impassive face. He settled into his chair, opened the thick file in front of him, and began to speak. This court has carefully reviewed all evidence submitted by both parties, the judge said, his voice flat and businesslike. We have heard testimony from witnesses and thoroughly considered the arguments presented by counsel. As always, in matters concerning minor children, this court's primary concern is the best interest and welfare of the child. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. My hands were shaking in my lap. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. The plaintiff, Mr. Reynolds, has presented substantial evidence in support of his claims, the judge continued. The photographic evidence demonstrates a pattern of domestic neglect. The financial documentation indicates irresponsible spending behavior. And most significantly, the expert testimony provided by Dr. Raymond Price offers a professional, clinical assessment of the defendant's emotional state and parenting capabilities. Every word was a nail being hammered into my coffin. I could barely breathe. Furthermore, the judge said, glancing up from his notes to look directly at me, this court witnessed firsthand the defendant's emotional instability during her testimony. Mrs. Reynolds' outburst, her inability to maintain composure under questioning, and her unsubstantiated accusations all corroborate Dr. Price's professional findings. Tears were streaming down my face. I couldn't stop them. I didn't even try. Therefore, the judge said, raising his gavel, having weighed all evidence and testimony and considering above all the best interest of the minor child, Jalen Reynolds, this court rules. And then a voice rang out from the back of the courtroom. Stop! Every single head in that courtroom spun toward the doors at once. And standing there in the entrance, still wearing his school uniform with his backpack slung over one shoulder, was my son, my Jalen. His chest was heaving like he had been running and his eyes were wide and scared, but there was something else there too. Determination. Fierce, unshakable determination. Jalen, I breathed, not believing what I was seeing. How was he here? School was in session. Who brought him? Darnell's reaction was instantaneous and explosive. He shot up from his chair so fast it nearly toppled over, his face draining of color like someone had pulled a plug. Jalen, what are you doing here? Shouted, his voice cracking with something I had never heard from him before. Panic, pure undiluted panic. You can't be in here, get out now. But Jalen didn't move. He stood his ground in that doorway, small and scared but refusing to back down. Mr. Reynolds, sit down, the judge commanded, his voice sharp as a blade. Darnell was shaking visibly. Your Honor, this is completely inappropriate. A child has no place in these proceedings. He needs to be removed immediately. Insist, I said sit down, the judge repeated, banging his gavel hard enough to make the sound echo off the walls. Craig Holden was on his feet too, his usual composure cracked wide open. Your Honor, this is a blatant violation of courtroom procedure. The child cannot simply interrupt these proceedings. Whatever he has to say is inadmissible. I demand he be escorted out at once. But the judge wasn't looking at Holden. He wasn't looking at Darnell. His eyes were fixed on Jalen with an expression I couldn't quite read. Curiosity maybe, or suspicion, or both. Young man, the judge said, his voice softening just slightly. How did you get here? Who brought you to this courtroom? Jalen walked down the center aisle, his sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. He walked past the rows of seats, past the attorneys, past his father who was still standing there trembling with his fists clenched. He walked past me, though he glanced at me for just a second with a look that seemed to say, "It's okay, Mom, I've got this." He stopped right in front of the judge's bench, so small standing there, looking up at that towering platform, but his voice was clear and steady when he spoke. "My Auntie Portia drove me, Your Honor, but I asked her to bring me. She's waiting in the hallway." "And why did you ask her to bring you here today?" the judge asked. Jalen took a deep breath. I could see his hands trembling at his sides, but he didn't let his voice waver. "Because last night I heard my dad on the phone. He was talking to Miss Diana, and he told her that today the judge was going to give him custody of me. He said he finally won. He said Mom was going to lose everything and they could finally start their real life together in Miami." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I heard someone in the gallery gasp. A woman in the designer dress, the one I now knew was named Diana, had gone completely pale. "He said Mom was too stupid to figure it out," Jalen continued, his voice getting stronger with every word. "He said she never suspected anything, but that's not true because I figured it out and I have proof." He swung his backpack around to his front and unzipped it. From inside, he pulled out that old cracked tablet, the one he had been keeping under his pillow for weeks. One I had wondered about so many times without understanding why it was so important to him. "Your Honor," Jalen said, holding up the tablet with both hands, "may I please show you something that my mom doesn't know about?" The judge stared at him for a long, suspended moment. The entire courtroom held its breath, then the judge nodded slowly. "Yes, son, yes, you may." "No," Darnell screamed, lunging toward the front of the courtroom. "You can't allow this. That's private. That's my home." "He can't." Two bailiffs intercepted him before he made it 3 steps. They grabbed his arms and forced them behind his back, one of them reaching for handcuffs. Darnell struggled and thrashed, screaming things that didn't even make sense anymore, his whole carefully constructed facade crumbling into dust right before everyone's eyes. In the gallery, Diana had jumped to her feet and was moving toward the exit, but another bailiff was already blocking the door. She stopped, frozen, her face twisted with fear. A court clerk approached Jalen and helped him connect his tablet to the courtroom's display system. The large monitors mounted on the walls flickered to life. Everyone in that room was holding their breath. Jalen's small finger hovered over the screen for just a moment. Then he pressed play. The video began, and from the very first second, I knew that Darnell's entire world was about to come crashing down around him. The footage showed our living room. Angle was low and slightly shaky, like the tablet had been hidden somewhere near the floor. Behind the potted plant in the corner, I realized Jalen's secret hiding spot, the place he always went when he wanted to spy on us during hide and seek. The timestamp in the corner said it was from 3 weeks ago, around 11:30 at night. On the screen, Darnell walked into the living room, and right behind him, her hand in his, was Diana. She wasn't wearing business casual like she had been in court. She was in a silk robe, looking completely at home in my house, in my living room, like she belonged there. Darnell pulled her close and kissed her. A long, deep, passionate kiss, his hands running down her back, right there in the room where I had read bedtime stories to Jalen, where we had celebrated birthdays, where I had spent 11 years building what I thought was a home. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Someone whispered, "Oh my lord." I felt Vanessa's hand close around mine, squeezing tight, but the video was only just getting started, because then they started talking, and every word that came out of their mouths was captured perfectly by that little tablet hidden behind the plant. Diana's voice came through the speakers first, clear as a bell. "Baby, are you absolutely sure this plan is going to work? What if Tamika starts asking questions? What if she figures something out?" Darnell laughed, actually laughed, y'all. This arrogant, dismissive laugh that made my skin crawl. "Tamika, please, that woman is completely oblivious. She's too busy playing happy homemaker to notice anything. I've been transferring money out of our accounts for almost 8 months and she hasn't caught on to a single thing." "How much have you moved so far?" Diana asked, running her fingers along his collar. "A little over $475,000, Darnell said proudly, like he was boasting about a promotion at work. "All sitting safe and sound in that offshore account under your name. Once this divorce is finalized and I get the house, we'll sell it and be on a plane to Miami before she even knows what hit her." My hand flew to my mouth. $475,000, more than I had even realized we had. He had stolen every penny of our future and hidden it where I would never find it. On the screen, Diana moved closer to him, pressing herself against his chest. "And you're certain you'll get full custody of Jalen? That's the part I'm worried about." "Baby, I've got the most aggressive family lawyer in Harris County," Darnell said confidently. "And more importantly, I've got Raymond on our side. His testimony as a behavioral expert is going to seal the deal. That judge is going to take one look at his report and think Tamika is completely unfit." My entire body went rigid. Raymond, he had just said Raymond. Dr. Raymond Price wasn't some objective professional. He was part of their scheme all along. "Speaking of Raymond," Diana said with a little smile, "he called me earlier. He wanted to make sure he had all his notes ready for the trial. He's good, isn't he?" "The best," Darnell agreed. "That's why I went through you to find him. You said he was the most convincing expert witness you'd ever worked with, and you were right. Everything in his report sounds so clinical, so professional. No judge is going to question it." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. Diana had found Dr. Price. She had connected Darnell with the man who would lie under oath about me and my son. They were all working together, all three of them conspiring to destroy my life. "But what about Jalen?" Diana asked, tilting her head. "What if he doesn't want to come with you? He seems really attached to his mother." Darnell's laugh this time was cold and cruel, completely devoid of any fatherly warmth. "Jalen's 11 years old. Kids that age are easy to manipulate. I've been showering him with gifts, undermining Tamika at every turn. By the time the court hands him over to me, he won't even want to be around her anymore. And if he still does, he'll adjust. Kids are resilient." He pulled Diana closer, his voice dropping to something almost tender, which made it even more disgusting. "Besides, you're going to be his new mom, a real mom, someone successful and intelligent and beautiful, not some washed-up housewife who couldn't even keep a job." Diana giggled. "You're terrible." "I'm practical," Darnell corrected. "Tamika gave up her career to raise Jalen, which means legally she contributed nothing financially to this marriage. My lawyer is going to argue that she's not entitled to a single dime, and with Raymond's testimony painting her as emotionally unstable, I get everything. House, the kid, the money, everything." "What about making her look unstable in court?" Diana asked. "What if she keeps her composure?" This was the part that made my blood turn to ice. Darnell walked over to the coffee table and picked up his phone. He swiped through it for a moment, then turned the screen to show Diana. "This is my insurance policy." On his phone was the photograph. That horrible, humiliating photograph of me screaming and crying in our bedroom. Same one Craig Holden had shown in court. "I took this about 3 weeks ago," Darnell explained with sick satisfaction. "I spent a solid hour telling Tamika what a pathetic excuse for a wife and mother she was. I told her Jalen deserved better. I told her no man would ever want her. I kept pushing and pushing until she finally snapped. And right when she was at her lowest point, I pulled out my phone and captured this." "Darnell, that's brilliant," Diana breathed, looking at the photo with admiration. "I know," he said smugly. "During the trial, Holden is going to provoke her on the stand. He's going to push her buttons until she loses her temper in front of the judge. Once she has an emotional outburst in court, Raymond's psychological evaluation will look completely legitimate. The judge will see her fall apart with his own eyes. No one will doubt that she's unstable." He kissed again, long and slow, and then Darnell picked up a wine glass from the side table and raised it in the air. "To freedom," he toasted, his smile wide and wicked. "To finally getting rid of dead weight." Diana raised her glass too, clinking it against his. "To our new life together, to Miami, and to that stupid woman finally getting exactly what she deserves." "Which is nothing," Darnell added. "Absolutely nothing," Diana agreed. We both laughed and drank, standing there in my living room, celebrating the destruction of my life like it was a party. The video ended. The screen went black, and the courtroom was so silent you could have heard a pin drop on cotton. For maybe 4 or 5 seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The weight of what everyone had just witnessed hung in the air like a physical thing, pressing down on all of us, and then the room absolutely erupted. Oh my God, they planned the whole thing. That woman is his mistress? The expert was in on it. He set her up from the beginning. Voices overlapped and crashed into each other from every direction. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. Tears were pouring down my face, but I couldn't even feel them. I was in a state of complete and total shock. The lies had been exposed, the conspiracy had been laid bare for everyone to see, and I hadn't even known about the video until this very moment. My 11-year-old son had recorded everything. He had hidden behind that plant with his old tablet and captured every single word, and he had carried that secret for weeks, sleeping with that tablet under his pillow every night, waiting for the moment when he could save his mama. Darnell was screaming at the top of his lungs, fighting against the bailiffs who had him pinned. That video is fake, it's doctored, she manipulated the footage. You can't use that as evidence, this is entrapment. Quiet, the judge roared, his face so red with fury I thought he might burst a blood vessel. He slammed his gavel down so hard the sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. In the gallery, Diana had collapsed onto the floor. Her designer dress was bunched up around her knees, her perfectly styled hair falling into her face. She was sobbing hysterically, mascara streaming down her cheeks in black rivers. He made me do it, she wailed, pointing a trembling finger at Darnell. It was all his idea. He promised we'd be together, he promised he'd marry me. I only did it because I loved him. She's lying, Darnell screamed back, his voice cracking with desperation. She seduced me, she came up with this whole plan, I'm the victim here, she manipulated everything. Both of you be silent this instant, the judge bellowed, rising to his full height behind the bench. His voice was thunder, his eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen from anyone before. Bailiffs forced Darnell down into his chair and slapped handcuffs onto his wrists. Another bailiff had Diana by the arm, pulling her to her feet. Her legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. The judge turned his attention to Craig Holden, who looked like a man watching his entire career burn to ashes right in front of him. All the color had drained from his face. His hands were trembling. Confident, aggressive attorney who had torn me apart on the witness stand was gone, replaced by someone who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Mr. Holden, the judge said, his voice dripping with ice, did you have any knowledge of this conspiracy? Did you know that your expert witness was personally connected to your client and his mistress? Holden swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. No, Your Honor, he said quickly, his voice thin and reedy. I swear I had no knowledge of any relationship between Dr. Price and the parties involved. Mr. Reynolds assured me that Dr. Price was an independent, objective professional. I would never knowingly present fraudulent testimony. I would never. That may spare you from criminal prosecution, the judge interrupted coldly, but I am immediately reporting this matter to the State Bar Association. Your conduct in this case, whether or not you had direct knowledge of the fraud, was aggressive, unethical, and designed to manipulate these proceedings. You deliberately provoked the defendant. You attempted to weaponize her emotional distress. You will face serious professional consequences. Holden sank into his chair like a deflated balloon. His career was over and everyone in that room knew it. The judge then looked at Jalen, who was still standing at the front of the courtroom, clutching his tablet with both hands. The anger in the judge's face softened, replaced by something that looked almost like tenderness. Young man, the judge said gently, that was an incredibly important video you just showed this court. Can you tell me when you recorded it? Jalen's voice was small but steady. About 3 weeks ago, Your Honor. I couldn't sleep that night because I heard Dad's car come home really late. I wanted to come downstairs to say goodnight, but when I got to the stairs, I heard voices. I saw Dad with Miss Diana in the living room. I knew I wasn't supposed to see them together like that, so I hid behind the big plant. And why did you decide to record them? Jalen glanced over at me, and my heart shattered into a million pieces at the love I saw in his eyes. Because my mom always taught me something important. She told me that if somebody's doing something wrong and you want people to believe you, you need proof. She said that the truth only matters if you can show it, so I used my old tablet to record everything. I kept it hidden under my pillow because I was scared Dad might find it and delete it. And why did you decide to come forward today? The judge asked. Tears started rolling down Jalen's cheeks, but he didn't look away. Because yesterday, Dad picked me up from school during lunch. He took me to get pizza and he told me that today the judge was going to make me go live with him. He said I wouldn't get to see Mom much anymore. He said it was better that way because Mom was sick and needed to rest. Jalen's voice cracked, but he pushed through. But Mom isn't sick. Mom is the best mom in the whole world. She makes me breakfast every morning. She helps me with my homework every single night. She comes to all my basketball games. She reads to me before bed. She's always there for me, always. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Dad barely talks to me except when he's buying me stuff. He never helps me with homework. He never asks about my day. He only started acting like a good dad after he wanted to take me away from Mom. The courtroom was completely silent except for the sound of people crying. I saw the female bailiff near the door dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Even the court reporter had stopped typing and was just staring at Jalen with tears on her cheeks. I heard Dad and Miss Diana say horrible things about my mom, Jalen continued. They called her stupid. They said she deserved nothing. They were planning to take me away from her and move to Miami with all the money they stole. And I couldn't let them do that. I couldn't let them hurt my mom anymore. The judge had to stop and compose himself. I saw him blink rapidly several times, his jaw tight with emotion. Young man, he finally said, his voice slightly hoarse, you are one of the bravest young people I have ever had the privilege of meeting in my courtroom. What you did today took incredible courage. The judge picked up his gavel and when he spoke again, his voice rang with authority and finality. This court finds that the plaintiff's petition for dissolution of marriage was based entirely on fraud, perjury, conspiracy, and manufactured evidence. The petition is hereby dismissed in its entirety. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented today, this court makes the following orders. He looked down at his notes and then back up, his gaze sweeping across the room. 1. Mrs. Tamika Reynolds is granted full and sole custody of the minor child Jalen Reynolds, effective immediately. I let out a sob so loud it echoed off the walls. 2. Mr. Darnell Reynolds' request for divorce is denied. However, Mrs. Reynolds is hereby granted leave to file her own petition for divorce on grounds of adultery, fraud, and financial malfeasance. This court will personally ensure that case is expedited and handled with the urgency it deserves. 3. The judge continued, his voice booming through the courtroom. All marital assets are hereby frozen effective immediately. Full forensic investigation will be conducted to locate all funds illegally transferred by Mr. Reynolds. Every single penny that was stolen from Mrs. Reynolds will be recovered and returned to her, along with appropriate interest and damages. 4. The marital home located at 4721 Willowbrook Lane is awarded solely to Mrs. Tamika Reynolds and her son. Mr. Reynolds is prohibited from entering the premises or contacting Mrs. Reynolds except through legal counsel. And 5, the judge said, his eyes landing on Darnell with absolute disgust, then shifting to Diana with equal contempt. Mr. Darnell Reynolds and Ms. Diana Hartwell, you are both hereby placed under arrest. The charges include conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury before this court, grand larceny, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. Officers, remove them from my courtroom immediately. Darnell was still screaming as the bailiffs dragged him toward the side door. This is an overall appeal, you can't do this to me, I have rights. She turned my own son against me, but nobody was listening to him anymore. Nobody cared what he had to say. The bailiffs hauled him through the door and his screams faded down the hallway until they disappeared entirely. Diana had stopped fighting. All the fight had drained out of her completely. He led her out in handcuffs, her expensive dress wrinkled and stained with tears, her designer makeup smeared across her face like war paint. She didn't look elegant anymore. She didn't look sophisticated or beautiful or superior. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had gambled everything on a scheme built on lies and lost. I sat there in complete shock, unable to process what had just happened. My entire body was trembling. Tears were streaming down my face in rivers. Vanessa had her arm around my shoulders and she was laughing and crying at the same time, saying things like, "You did it, Tamika, we did it, it's over." But I wasn't looking at Vanessa. I wasn't looking at the judge or the bailiffs or the gallery full of people who were clapping and cheering. I was looking at my son. Jalen was being helped down from the front of the courtroom by the kind clerk who had assisted with the tablet. His backpack was still hanging off one shoulder. His school uniform was wrinkled from running. He looked so small standing there, so young, but also somehow older than any 11-year-old should ever have to be. I stood up from my chair so fast I nearly knocked it over. I ran to him, dropping to my knees and pulling him into my arms so tightly I could feel both our hearts pounding against each other. "Thank you," I whispered into his hair, sobbing so hard I could barely get the words out. "Thank you, baby. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for being so brave." "I love you, Mom," Jalen said, his small arms wrapped around my neck, his face buried in my shoulder. "I couldn't let them take you away from me. You're my mom. You're the best mom ever." "I love you too, baby boy," I cried. "So much, more than you will ever know, more than anything in this whole wide world." We stayed there on the floor of that courtroom, holding each other, crying tears of relief and joy and gratitude, while everyone around us celebrated the miracle that had just taken place. Justice had finally been served. 6 months have passed since that day in the courtroom, and y'all, my life looks completely different now. Darnell was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, theft, perjury, and conspiracy. Diana Hartwell received 8 years, and her professional license as a financial consultant was permanently revoked. Dr. Raymond Price lost his psychology license and is facing his own criminal charges for his role in the scheme. And Craig Holden was disbarred by the State Bar Association. Last I heard, he's working as a paralegal somewhere, a long fall from the aggressive powerhouse attorney he used to be. The forensic investigation recovered every dollar Darnell had stolen. All $475,000 was returned to me, plus additional damages awarded by the court. I sold that house on Willowbrook Lane. I couldn't live there anymore. Not after everything that had happened within those walls. Too many painful memories, too many ghosts. Jalen and I moved into a beautiful 3-bedroom condo in the Heights. It's smaller than the old house, but it's ours. It's peaceful. It's filled with nothing but love and laughter and fresh start. I went back to work, y'all. After 11 years as a stay-at-home mom, I dusted off my old resume, updated my skills, and landed a position as an HR coordinator at a healthcare company downtown. The pay is good, the benefits are solid, and for the first time in over a decade, I have my own income, my own independence, my own sense of self. But the best part of these past 6 months has been watching Jalen flourish. My boy is thriving. He's getting straight A's in school. His basketball team made it to the regional championships. He's got a tight group of friends who come over for video game nights and sleepovers. He laughs all the time now. That worried look that used to cloud his eyes is completely gone. Every Saturday afternoon, we have a standing tradition. We go to Discovery Green in downtown Houston, find our favorite bench near the fountain, and share a basket of cheese fries from the food truck that parks on the corner. We sit there for hours just talking. About school, about his friends, about his dreams for the future, about anything and everything. It was during one of those Saturday afternoons about a month ago that I finally asked him the question that had been sitting in my heart since that day in the courtroom. "Baby," I said, dipping a fry into the cheese sauce, "can I ask you something?" "Sure, Mom," Jalen said, his mouth half full of fries. "Why did you record that video? I mean, I know you saw your dad with Miss Diana. What made you think to actually record them?" Jalen was quiet for a moment, swinging his legs on the bench. Then he looked up at me with those wise, beautiful eyes. "I didn't trust her from the very first time I saw her," he said. "When was that? Remember when we went to Target to get stuff for my science project? That lady who helped us find the poster board?" I remembered. A friendly woman had chatted with us in the school supplies aisle. She had been so helpful, so warm. That was Miss Diana, Jalen said. She pretended like she was just being nice, but after you walked away to find the glue sticks, I saw her roll her eyes at you. And then Dad showed up around the corner like it was a coincidence, but it wasn't. She looked at him and said, God, she's so clueless. And Dad just smiled. My blood ran cold. Diana had been watching us, studying us, playing a role right in front of my face. And at my basketball game a few weeks later, Jalen continued, she was there too, sitting in the back of the bleachers. She was writing stuff in a little notebook. I saw her watching you the whole time instead of watching the game. My clever, observant son had seen everything. So when I saw them together in our living room that night, Jalen said simply, I knew something bad was happening. Dad was kissing somebody who wasn't you. That's wrong. And I remembered what you always taught me. What did I always teach you? He smiled. You always said that if someone's doing something wrong and you want people to believe you, you need proof. You told me that the truth needs evidence or people won't listen. Remember when that kid in my class said I cheated on a test, but I didn't? You told me to make sure I had witnesses or something to show the teacher what really happened. I had said that, such a simple lesson, just trying to teach him about standing up for himself. I never imagined he would use that lesson to save both our lives. So I recorded them with my old tablet, Jalen said, and I kept it under my pillow because I was scared Dad would find it and erase everything. But why didn't you show me? I asked gently. Even when all the court stuff started? Jalen's eyes filled with tears. I wanted to, Mom, but Dad told Miss Diana that you were too dumb to understand what was happening. I didn't believe him. I never thought you were dumb. But I thought maybe the judge would figure out that Dad was lying on his own. I thought grown-ups would see the truth without me having to show them. He wiped his eyes. And I didn't want to make you sadder. You were already crying all the time. I didn't want you to see Dad kissing someone else and feel even worse. My heart cracked wide open. My baby boy had been carrying that burden all by himself, trying to protect his mama from more pain while also holding onto the evidence that could save us. But then Dad picked me up from school that day, Jalen continued. He took me to get pizza and told me the judge was going to make me live with him. He said I'd barely see you anymore. He said you were sick and needed space. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I called Auntie Portia from the bathroom at school the next morning. I told her everything. She came and checked me out and drove me to the courthouse. I had to do it, Mom. I couldn't let them take you away from me. I pulled him close and held him so tight, both of us crying on that park bench with cheese fries getting cold between us. You saved me, baby boy, I whispered. You saved both of us. You saved me too, Mom, Jalen said. You saved me every single day by being the best mom ever, by teaching me right from wrong, by teaching me to be brave. That's what saved us. Looking back on everything that happened, I still can't believe how close I came to losing everything. If Jalen hadn't recorded that video, if he hadn't been brave enough to bring it to court, if he hadn't stood up in front of all those people and told the truth, I would have lost my son, I would have lost my home, I would have lost every single thing that mattered. Darnell's plan was flawless. He had manipulated evidence, stolen money, planted a fake expert witness, and provoked me into looking unstable. Every single piece had worked exactly as he designed it. But he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated his son. He thought Jalen was just a kid who could be bought with PlayStations and sneakers. He thought Jalen wouldn't notice what was happening. He thought Jalen wouldn't care enough to stop him. He was wrong, so completely, totally, catastrophically wrong. People ask me all the time, Tamika, how did you survive all that? How did you get through it? And my answer is always the same. I didn't survive it alone. My son saved me. Some people say I should hate Darnell for what he did. And yes, there are moments when the anger rises up and I want to scream about the betrayal, the cruelty, the way he tried to erase me from my own son's life. But mostly I feel sorry for him. He had a beautiful family. He had a wife who loved him completely. He had a son who is smart, kind, brave, and incredible. He had a good life, and he threw it all away for money, for a mistress. For some fantasy life in Miami that will never happen now. He's sitting in a prison cell with 12 years to think about what he lost. And when he finally gets out, Jalen will be 23 years old, a grown man. Darnell will have missed his entire adolescence, his high school graduation, his first girlfriend, his driver's license, his prom, his college applications, all the moments that matter. He traded all of that for nothing, but me, I'm finally free. Free from a marriage that had been dead for years. Free from a man who never truly loved or respected me. Free from constantly feeling like I wasn't good enough. I'm building a life on my own terms now. A life where I make my own money, make my own decisions, and raise my son in a home overflowing with love and honesty. Is it perfect? No, some days are exhausting. Some days I'm overwhelmed trying to balance work and motherhood and everything in between. But even on the hardest days, I wake up knowing that I won. I won my freedom, I won my dignity, I won my son, and that's everything. To anyone watching this who might be going through something similar, if you're in a relationship where you feel invisible, where someone makes you feel small, where you're constantly being told you're not good enough, please know that you deserve better. If someone is gaslighting you, manipulating you, making you question your own reality, trust your gut. You're not crazy. If someone is financially controlling you, isolating you, planning to destroy you, please know that you can fight back, get help, document everything. Find someone who will believe you. And if you're a mother fighting for your children, never ever give up. Your kids need you. They see more than you think. They understand more than you realize. And they need their mama. I thought I was weak. I thought I was stupid. I thought I had failed as a wife and mother, but my son proved me wrong. He showed me that I had raised a hero, and if I could raise a boy that brave, that smart, that strong, then I couldn't have been the failure Darnell claimed I was. I was a good mother, I am a good mother, and that's what saved us in the end. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my story. If this touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Nunny Stories. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Your support means everything and helps us keep bringing you these powerful true stories. And if you really want to support this channel, consider sending a super thanks. It helps us continue sharing voices that need to be heard. My name is Tamika Reynolds. I'm 36 years old. I'm a survivor. I'm a professional. I'm a free woman. But most importantly, I'm Jalen's mother, and I always will be. The truth always comes to light, y'all. Always. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next story with love and respect.